Alright. Special features, just come along and have a chat with me, some tea, and maybe we might have a little fun. Special features, just talking about the movies and then something that might strike a chord with everyone. Strike a chord with everyone. Special features. Yeah.
And welcome to episode 8 of the Special Feature Podcast. Special Features Podcast. The Special Feature Podcast. I'm going to suddenly have an accent and be like some sort of foreign character. It feels like it's been forever since I've seen and talked to you last.
It certainly
Since
does.
we've sat at this table. It's almost as if we immediately started recording this podcast after the last one.
It does.
It's like no time at all has passed.
That's true.
And in a way, in a very literal way, none has.
But has no time passed, or has an infinity of time passed?
These are the questions. These are the questions. I don't know what they're about, but they're questions.
There are questions.
So we spent a significant portion of the last podcast discussing Severance, but do you think we spent enough time? Because people are really interested in Severance right now.
Okay, well, I mean...
I'm just not sure what else we could say about Severance, aside from the fact that there's some fun stuff in it and some great acting.
There is.
I certainly like, what's the name of the actress that plays Harmony Cobell?
Patricia...
Arquette.
Arquette.
Yes. Really like her.
Yeah. Sister of Rosanna Arquette.
She also seems like a really nice person in real life. Like every time I see videos of her doing promotional stuff with, oh God. Wow, did I really just forget the name of the actor that plays Mark? I totally did, even though he's one of my favorite actors. Ben something?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
It's funny because I just watched...
I really like him because he was in like Parks and Rec and stuff.
Yeah, no, I just watched quite a different... I just rewatched Rogue One.
Yeah.
And I really like who plays the villain in that, Ben Mendelsohn.
It's not Ben Mendelsohn, though.
No, it's not. But you said Ben, so...
I may actually be thinking that might actually be the name of his character from Parks and Rec. I don't actually remember. I don't know why I'm having trouble remembering his name, but it doesn't matter. The point is, I like him. Yeah. I really like his interactions with Patricia Arquette.
Yeah, me too.
Hi, Gwen. Are you coming out to join the podcast?
No.
No, she's just coming out to have a stinky poop or something.
She's just passing.
I'm just kidding. No, she was actually in the car accident we had earlier today. She took the brunt of the blast when the car was T-boned, and so thankfully she is totally fine.
Yes, very thankfully.
Although she is running the sink right now and ruining our recording because she's giving the dogs life-giving water.
The sound of running water can never be unpleasant.
That's true. I just don't want to start peeing while we record this podcast.
That would be bad.
Because you know how it is. Running water and I just go like a balloon. Oh no, she let Wesley back in. Gwen, I was leaving Wesley outside. Oh, she didn't let him in. That's just, wow, Leo is so loud.
He is loud.
His claws, I thought it was Wesley running into the house.
Yeah.
But it's just his big bag lady claws
or
clomping.
Rhinoceros.
Okay, well, anyway, we talk about them too much, but yeah, Patricia Arquette. I feel like I've seen her in a bunch of other stuff, and yet I can't seem to recall anything else she's been in.
Yeah, I honestly, it's funny because when I think of, just because this speaks to my age, but like I think of Rosanna Arquette, all the things I've seen her in.
I don't even know who
like
Rosanna Arquette is.
She was in a lot of things. She was the in Pulp Fiction. She was the wife of the drug dealer with all the piercings.
Okay. No, I know who that is. That woman, I've seen her in Pulp Fiction. I don't know if I've seen her in anything else.
She was also in After Hours. She was the girl that invites him up to the apartment.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as there being more or less to say about Severance, I just keep thinking like, I can understand that people might sign up for a procedure like that if they wanted to escape something within themselves. Because obviously, like, Mark becomes a severed worker because he's trying to not have to be himself for several hours a day and deal with the trauma of his wife's death. But I'm thinking outside of something like that, why would anyone want to be a severed worker other than like, oh, it feels like I'm not really working. It feels like I'm clocking into work and then immediately clocking out. And that just seems like super selfish because then you're creating this like alternate identity of yourself that's stuck only ever working all the time forever.
Yeah, that's just a slave. And of course, that's the point of the show, is that there's this slavery going on.
It just sounds so horrible.
Oh, it does
I can't
sound
imagine, because I also, just from a standpoint of somebody who doesn't like being out of control of themselves, like, and I mean, for a long time, I didn't really get drunk for the first time until like I was like 22 years old. And a lot of people I feel like get drunk way earlier. And it's because I was afraid of losing control of my own body, before I really understood what it meant. And like, that would be the ultimate torture for me with severance, because I'd like 8 hours a day, I wouldn't know what was happening to me.
Right.
And that's terrifying to me.
Yeah, well, me too. But I also think that if you had to work some kind of really mind-deadeningly boring task, sitting in a cubicle. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people who do these kind of jobs, but I'm just saying, if you had to do that and you could do it in a way where you didn't have to experience it, and where you could just get on the elevator going to work, and then suddenly you're awake again going home, and the entire span of time that you worked just kind of is erased. So your only life is essentially free. You don't have to work.
Yeah, but it's not erased. It just exists. It's still, the things that happen there still affect your mind and body. You know what I mean? Because your memories are altered, but the physical effect it has on you. Also, it's been scientifically proven that the parts of your mind that like learn and remember certain things can be like separate parts. So essentially, like, you can have like a habitual memory that's different from your active memory, which means that like if you do something habitually, and I think that's kind of a part of the show, isn't it? Because I can't remember anyone's friggin' name ever, but like the guy that's doing the paintings, like of the hallway.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to create like a link between himself and his outer self and his inner self. You know what I mean?
Right.
Through habit. And like, I mean, that's a real thing. Like, that's how cats, a lot of their short-term memory is stored. It's through habit. So it's like, it seems to me like it would have, if something bad was happening to your innie, it would get back to you in some way.
Yeah.
So even if you couldn't remember it, you'd still have, over time, you'd have these weird feelings of like dread or maladjustment or like things that would seep into your consciousness that would affect you.
Yeah, I think so. However, I think the trade-off, and the show kind of seems to suggest this too, I think, is that, yeah, there are negatives that sneak in and also positives, that kind of that sneak in. But at the same time, those things are on such a subconscious level that you can continue to live a completely different life on the outside, if you're an outie.
I know, I don't think it's worth it. And the fear of it is really what would bother me, because how do I know, like, I remember that the scientist that like tries to reintegrate Mark is telling him, like, actually, I'm not sure it's her that tells him this, but like somebody says to him, like, how do you know you're not like killing people all day, every day?
Right.
And it's like anything could be happening.
Sure.
How do I know I'm not, they're not like testing new strains of like AIDS on me?
Oh,
like,
sure.
It would scare me.
Yeah, and you and I would not trust the faceless system that would do this, because we couldn't live with not knowing. But I think there's a lot of people who maybe could live with not knowing.
Well, there's a lot of people that shut off their conscious minds every day and just like do whatever they do.
Right.
But that sounds terrible.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It's just, I don't know, it's too scary to me. It's too scary and in some ways too erotic. Because I just have all these erotic fantasies about what was happening to me.
Right.
Milchek holding me down with his strong arms. Now, I'll tell you, that would be one thing that would unnerve me. Like, because you know how Milchek, whenever he, like, fires people or has, like, talks with their outside work personas, he always comes across as, like, this very stern, intense kind of... I mean, he's friendly, but he's friendly in a scary way.
Yeah.
And I feel like if somebody like that talked to me and I knew he was working with some alternate part of my personality, I would be like, this guy's my supervisor? Good
Right.
Lord.
Yeah.
I'd be like, he's probably, like, beating the shit out of me every day. Like, it's scary.
Yeah, although you would know, because you wouldn't.
He'd be like, we want you to come back to work with us at Lumen. Here's a pineapple. And I'd be like, ugh. Like,
Well, it's
Can I not?
It kind of goes to that Seinfeld episode with the dentist, where the dentist drugs them, and then they
And they
wake
think
up
he's
and
like
he's
molesting
like
them.
zipping up his pants.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like it's unnerving.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. I'll tell you. Once I found out about the overtime contingency, I would definitely be like over it. I would be like, I'm not coming back after that.
Right.
Because knowing they can like shut you on and off in your anywhere you are. Mm-hmm. Ew.
Yeah.
Like, how do I know they're not going to like switch me to my innie when I'm like showering or something? I don't know. Like anything.
Anything. Right.
Also, it's like when they do that overtime contingency stuff and Mark is like, you could wake up and be behind the wheel of a car. Anything could be happening. I'm just like, okay. That sounds dangerous then. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I do think that there's obviously there are huge areas of the show that that feel unwise. You know?
But whatever.
Whatever.
Speaking of which, I know there was a movie you recently recommended to me that you said, was it Zach Galifianakis was in it?
Yes.
I haven't watched it yet. I did watch the trailer for it, but it seemed a little bit too close to home as far as like some political things that are happening now, which I think so. I kind of felt like I'm not sure I want to watch it because it seems stressful.
Yeah. Well, it's based on a true story, and it's worth knowing that story.
What's that movie called again?
It's called Winner, and
Winner.
It's about this woman whose real name is Reality Winner.
Okay.
And basically she was she worked. She
like peeked at Russian secrets or something?
Well, her job, she was in the military, and her job was to translate. She would listen in on recordings of like people speaking Arabic and Farsi and stuff like that. And she could translate these languages. She was gifted with linguistically. And so she would translate these things, and if she heard something that sounded like some kind of terrorist activity was going on, she could direct drone strikes. So basically,
Yikes.
Yeah. So she basically was responsible for like hundreds of people being blown up, because they were.
That sounds like a terrifying job.
Yeah, exactly, and it seems that way to her too.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a moral person, and this is not an easy job for her to do.
No.
But ultimately, what she ends up doing is she ends up getting a job with the NSA, and discovering that there's like some very shady shit going on around the election, the 2016 election.
Yeah.
In terms of Russian interference, and she realizes she knows something about this because she has access to the paperwork.
Yeah.
And so she releases it secretly to the press, and ends up getting detected and getting
turns
arrested.
into an international incident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she winds up going to prison for this. But she's only interested in doing the right thing. She's a moral person. And I think I thought it was an interesting movie. I thought it was a funny movie. The character is very interesting and funny. The character of Reality.
Yeah.
And her father is played by Zach Galifianakis, and he's kind of a tragic but funny guy in the movie because he kind of teaches her beliefs. He's also a moral guy, but he has a lot of problems.
It just, because of all the stuff that happened around, like, that election and stuff, that I feel like there's been so much going on in the government and so much for the past like 50 years, honestly, that it's like watching something like that just does. I mean, I agree with you. It does sound like it's a story that needs to be heard, but not necessarily by me.
Yeah, although I would recommend it, and because I'm not necessarily recommending it for the historical,
for the nature of the story.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't really like movies that are necessarily political. I just like movies that are good.
Yeah.
And I remember I was talking to somebody about Schindler's List some years ago, and he was saying to me, I just can't face that movie because like I already know so much about the Holocaust. What do I need 3 hours of having my face rubbed in that horrible stuff, And I was trying to tell him, Schindler's List is not really
it's
like
more
that.
than about the Holocaust.
Yeah, there's comedy. It's a funny movie. It is very dark, but it's just a great movie. I mean,
okay, but like, let me put it differently. Like, I agree with what you're saying, but like, and obviously I'm not in any way comparing my own experiences to people who were in the Holocaust, but people who were in the Holocaust if they didn't want to watch Schindler's List, I could understand.
Oh, absolutely.
And like in a way, I feel like living through disturbing events makes it hard to digest media that involves them.
Right.
So in that respect, like, we've lived through these issues with the government.
Right.
And so I think for me, it makes it more stressful to partake in media that's like around them. In the same way that it was like stressful for me to watch the movie, is it called Glass?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
You're talking about the plagiarism case.
Yeah. Like, just in the respect that like...
Is it Broken Glass?
I don't know. My point is when good people like,
or Shattered
leak
Glass.
information.
I think it's Shattered Glass, the name of that.
Yeah, it might be. But my point is like when people leak important information that needs to be out there, like it's distressing for me to see the shit they have to go through, despite the fact that they're just trying to do the right thing.
Right.
It's like that. There was some case where like some security guard was like basically put on blast by the FBI because he reported a bomb that turned out to be a real bomb, and then they like he got like accused of planting the bomb.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember when that happened. Yeah, and he sort of was smeared.
Yeah, and his life was like dragged through the mud for like years.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Yeah.
Just because he basically just did his job.
Right.
And it's like.
Just because he seemed kind of like the kind of guy people would expect to be a kind of a creepy weirdo.
Yeah, it's so messed up.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. That stuff happens all the time, and that's stressful. Like, there's so much injustice in our political system.
There is. But I kind of feel like, for one thing, when I'm watching a movie like this, I feel like I'm watching something that took a little bit of nerve to make.
Yeah.
Because you're going
there's people who, yeah.
Yeah. But beyond that, if a movie like that is also actually entertaining as a movie, forget the content, just as a movie, as the performances and stuff, I really want to know it,
Yeah,
because
of course.
like for instance, another good example of a very similar kind of movie was the one about Tanya Harding.
I, Tonya.
Yeah, I, Tonya.
Yeah.
I thought that movie was just a great movie,
Oh, yeah, that one was definitely interesting.
Yeah, well, this one...
But that one was more just like a lesson in like, if don't do shady things and get involved with shady people, because shady people a lot of the time are stupid.
Yeah, right.
And as a result, you kind of might screw yourself over.
Yeah. Well, ironically, I think that I, Tonya is very similar to this Winter movie.
Yeah.
And just structurally and the mood, the vibe that it creates.
Okay. Well, I'll still consider taking a look at it.
Yeah, I would recommend it.
But I'm trying to think, because I know we already talked about Equilibrium in the last podcast, and we talked about, there was some other movie I saw recently that I wanted to discuss. No, I know my fiance, we talked about the fact that she watched Priscilla, Queen of the Desert for the first time, and we were talking about...
That's a great movie.
We were talking about movies where, like, masculine actors have to play, like, drag queens or, like, gay characters or trans characters or things like that.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so complicated now, because now I feel like there's a lot of the argument where it's like, okay, if you're going to have like a trans character in a movie, it should be played by a real trans person. And it's hard for me to argue with that, because for the most part, if you can find somebody who's a good actor and who also has the life experience behind that character, why not? You know? And so there's no real argument against, the people who have actually gone through the things that are being portrayed playing those people.
For sure.
But I also think there's an argument to be had for, like, acting is acting. And arguably you could say that, like, almost anyone could play any role, as long as it's not, like, ridiculously over the top, like, cruel or offensive to some people in some way.
Right. Well, and to me, it's almost funny, because so often in the past, you've had very gay men and probably very gay women playing, very, very straight people. You know what I mean? Because it was not, obviously a few decades ago, it was not possible for a gay person to play a gay person.
No, I know. And if you follow that line back far enough, that line of thinking, we talk about, like, in the Shakespearean theater, like men playing women and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, at some point, there have been, but that was also because the rules in place were wrong at the time. Like, obviously you shouldn't be, like, outlawing female actors or gay actors.
Right. No, absolutely. But I'm just saying that, that if gay people can play straight people and do it very, very convincingly.
Yeah, why can't straight people play gay people?
Yeah, exactly. I
No,
don't
I
think
agree.
sexuality should necessarily be something that you have to. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I'm not gay, so what do I?
I guess here's my thinking on it. The only time when it should be important, like the kind of person is like which kind of person is portraying what kind of person in a movie, is if that movie is about a topic that's like specific to that group of people.
Yeah.
So if you have a movie that's like about black culture and has like a black protagonist, that makes sense. Obviously, you shouldn't have a white guy in blackface playing a black character.
Yeah, that would be taking it too far.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
like there's everything in balance. You know what I mean? And I think like on the opposite side of that, people get very upset these days whenever like a black character is cast in like a traditionally white role. If the role has nothing to do with race, who cares?
No, absolutely.
Cast anybody in that role.
Yeah.
Like all these live action Disney remakes. First of all, I hate those remakes, but not because of the casting.
Right.
I hate them because they're silly.
Yeah.
Like the cartoons were good. I don't really see a need to make. If you're going to make movies, make new good movies. Don't like remake Disney cartoons live action. But as far as it goes, if they're going to make them anyway, I couldn't care less who's casted in them as long as they do their job. Who
if they're
cares?
good. No, in fact, I remember I saw the movie Flight, and it stars Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
And he's kind of this drunk
Humphrey
airline
Bogart.
pilot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I said that to you, that performance that he does in that movie is a great Humphrey Bogart role.
Wesley's back.
I know.
He's galloping around.
Galloping, yeah. And
yeah.
I was thinking, if they did a movie now where you had Humphrey Bogart, they wanted to remake Casablanca or something.
You could have Denzel
You could have
Washington.
Denzel
I know, but can you imagine the amount of like keyboard warriors that would like
course.
come out being upset about? Oh my, Humphrey! That movie was classic with Humphrey. How dare you?
I know.
How dare you put a black man in that role, like for no reason?
Yeah.
Like, because that role, who cares who plays?
Yeah, who cares? And besides, Denzel does a great job with that.
Also, Denzel Washington is a great actor.
Yeah, exactly.
So if, in my opinion, Denzel Washington, any role that he feels he's right for and that he seems right for, he should be able to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like, it's like that whole thing where people were getting upset because they wanted Idris Elba to play the new James Bond. I thought Idris Elba is a perfect choice.
Yeah, he'd be great.
For a new James Bond. He's like suave as hell.
Yeah.
He's like this really intense kind of like, and also he's inherently like, kind of, I don't want to say, like, I'm not attracted to men. Not that there's a problem with that. But, like, he's inherently kind of a sexy guy.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's a perfect James Bond. But everybody's like, oh, but James Bond is supposed to be white. It's like, no, he's supposed to be British. It doesn't matter if he's white.
It would actually be very funny to do a remake of Live and Let Die, which is the James Bond movie where James Bond is up against these black drug dealers.
Yeah.
And reverse all that so that you have Idris Elba playing James Bond
Against white drug dealers?
Maybe he's up against the Ku Klux Klan or something like that.
You know, it's funny you mention that because it kind of reminds me of how Dave Chappelle in one of... Okay, come on, really? Are we going to start the barking again now that you're both in here? Yeah. Leo, if you want attention, you have to come over to us. We're not going to go over there while we're podcasting and pet you on the floor. I love you, but good Lord. Anyway, but yeah, I remember Dave Chappelle in one of his recent stand-ups was talking about how like the white opiate addiction problem and how it was kind of reflective of like the black crack addiction problem from the past.
That's true, yeah.
Which I mean, I'm sure is still a problem, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and how like he was, I remember a joke he made was like, he was like, it kind of makes me feel like I understand now how all of those white people felt when black people were addicted to crack because I don't care either. But I was like, I kind of lost the track of where. Oh, because we were talking about the white drug addicts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it made me think of that because I was thinking like heroin addicted whites. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
But yeah. Anyway, long story short, anybody who's good can play any role that doesn't have like a specific need for a certain type of person or character.
No, absolutely.
Like, and I know there's a lot of people who would argue like, oh, all these classic properties, they were what they were because that character was that specific like race or whatever. And it's like, no, they weren't.
No.
You could have like Peter Pan can be anybody.
Right.
Who gives a crap? It's a magical fairy boy.
Right.
Like black, white, Native American, Filipino. I don't care.
The thing is, Peter Pan, when they did it on stage, was always a woman.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
but also, here's another thing. Think about this, right? Just saying Filipino, I was thinking like East Asian ladyboys. Mm-hmm. They should have a Ladyboy Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Because that would be amazing.
Yeah,
That's
that
perfect
would
for
be.
Peter Pan, especially one that has like really striking features.
Right.
That looks like almost like a real live fairy or
Like an
something.
elf. Yeah,
You know, like an
exactly.
elf, like just this kind of glowing, sharp features.
Right.
That would be amazing.
That would be. They should do that.
We should get on the phone to Thailand film producers and be like,
Right.
you guys should do a Thai Ladyboy Peter Pan,
Peter Pan, yeah.
and internationally release it, and I will watch it forever.
That would be great. They totally should do that.
You can have all the characters be ladyboys.
Yeah,
You
that
have
could
Wendy
whole-
be a
That
ladyboy.
should be a whole new genre.
Ladyboy theater, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if the Hollywood of India is Bollywood, then what would the Ladyboy Hollywood of Thailand be called?
Bangkok would.
Bangkok Wood. Just add continuous boner references on top of Bangkok Wood erection.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh man. Speaking of which, I really want to visit Thailand. I know you guys. There was a period of time you guys lived in Thailand, and by you guys, I'm.
No, we lived in Korea, but we used to go to.
You never lived in Thailand. You
No.
just visited Thailand.
Yeah, a couple
but you
times.
visited Thailand.
Yeah, we visited.
Okay, so you're more familiar with Thailand than somebody who hasn't been to Thailand.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, I'm always drawn to Thailand just because, like, you know, it's beautiful, it's tropical, like
Yeah.
culturally, it's very diverse and interesting, and
Yeah, it's a
also
beautiful
there's really
place.
good medical care in Bangkok, which
You know, that's the first. I mean, like I've heard of that now, but at the time I had no idea.
yeah, Peace Corps used to medevac people to Bangkok all the time from
Well,
where I was in
it's a big
Central
city.
Asia.
Yeah, no, I believe it. It's a big city. We used to, when we always, we flew to Bangkok from Korea, and we usually hung out there for like a few days before we went down to the islands.
Well, you know me, I'm not a big fan of like the tropics just because heat is a tough one for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as beautiful goes and as far as cultural goes and also like just the food, you know, the atmosphere, like there's a lot of cool stuff about Thailand.
There is. We loved it. We loved going there. I mean, it's funny because when you're walking down the street in Bangkok, you just have this sort of, it feels very exotic,
Yeah.
you know, and I always thought just Thailand seemed like a very exotic place, you know, but when you're there, it feels like there's incense in the air and stuff. It's kind of an amazing thing.
Well, that's the same reason I'm drawn to India in all honesty.
Yeah, well, me too.
Because
and
like
that's a place
there's
I'd like
parts
to
of
go.
India that are just beautiful and amazing. And also culturally speaking, I feel like there's not many places on earth that are more far removed from Western culture than India.
Right.
I mean, I don't know about all of India because obviously India is a friggin' huge place.
Right.
And there's a lot of different like subtle differences in the culture around the area, but like just as far as like what I am familiar with about India from like what I've seen from like travel shows, from what I've experienced in the Peace Corps, from what I know from like movies and TV. India just, and also from eating Indian food of
Right.
all different parts of India, which is like amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like India feels like a very like rich experience.
Yeah.
It feels like it's like, you know, like I don't want to like reduce it to anything, but I just mean like, you walk through the streets, the hustle and bustle of society with warm spices in the air, and
Right.
you know, like I don't know, it just seems very like. Also, there's so many different, like just topographically speaking and like environmentally speaking, there's so many different types of like biomes in India.
Yep.
Because you have like the ocean in the south, and you have like deserts, and you have like mountains. Like,
Yep.
it's just like there's a lot to get into there.
Yeah, no, I've always thought it sounded like, if anything, for me, it makes me a little intimidated because, I mean, I've always loved traveling, but everything I heard about India always made it sound like it was a very intense place to go. You know, there's like obviously the smells, everything is intense. And as such, it's a little scary, you know, because, you know, you feel like, you know, there's everything there. There's death, there's life, you know, there's lepers, there's, you know.
But I mean, I
beggars.
feel like that's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of that somewhere in every country and every continent.
Sure.
You know, so like even, I mean, we always, in the West, you know, we live on the East Coast of the United States, right? We live in a pretty nice little city, but there are swaths of the United States that are like just as bizarre and like stricken with like poverty or like dealing with like all kinds of different things. Like I'm just saying there's people living in ways even here that we cannot imagine or have not experienced.
Absolutely. For sure.
and I don't want to just reduce it to poverty, because I know like not all of India is just like desperate poverty. There is a lot of poverty in India, but I'm aware that like there are, India has all kinds,
Yeah. No, absolutely.
and and a lot of, I mean, like I think a lot of Westerners like to pretend that like the West is somehow like this like superior, like everything here is clean and we're all rich and healthy, but it's like
Right.
ultimately somewhere everything is happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we have rich, poor, middle class. We have people living in all different kinds of ways. I mean, Christ, somebody like the way people live in Florida is so different from the way people live in like Maine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like to say, I'm sure in India it's the same.
Yeah.
They're
absolutely.
like a peasant living in Goa probably has a very different life from like a middle class guy living in like, Amritsar or something.
Oh, sure.
Or in, I don't know, anywhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I would go. I mean, obviously I'm getting to the age now where it's going to be a little bit more risky for me to go someplace where I might get sick or injured.
No, of course, and that's a big concern too.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't go. I mean,
Yeah.
I would go. I just it's a long way to go, and it's not a cheap trip.
Well, I mean, at this point in my life, I'm not 100% sure I'm ever going to get the chance to go, but ideally,
Yeah,
at some point, I would like to.
yeah,
Just because, I don't know, I'm really in love with Asia in general.
yeah,
And like, I mean, honestly, you a lot of people I know when they say they're in love with Asia basically mean like Japan and Korea. And like, that's kind of messed up because like, I genuinely like all parts of Asia. I like East Asia. Obviously, my Peace Corps service was in Central Asia.
yeah. I mean, you lived in Asia.
I like, I'm very interested in China. I'm very interested in Russia, and India. Like,
Yeah.
like basically like, I mean, I'm just all of Asia. And I think it's just because that's about as different as culture gets for human beings. You know what I mean? Like if you travel the globe, in my opinion, and this is not based on like, obviously like I'm going to do some like very broad generalizations here, but like you basically, the biggest changes in culture you can have are like the far West, like the Americas versus Africa, which is like, culturally super complex and diverse,
Right.
versus like Europe essentially,
Yep.
versus like big swaths of Asia. And obviously Asia can be broken into like 2 or 3 different major sections too.
Yeah.
So like, to me, I feel like Asia is like their culture is like super interesting and diverse and super different from the kind of life I've led and the culture I've been a part of.
Sure.
And as a result of that, I'm very drawn to it.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I'm drawn to Africa, but I gotta admit, Africa makes me a little bit nervous, not because it's like, weird racial issues, but like Africa makes me nervous because of, I don't know, malaria, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I know not all of Africa has malaria, but like,
But I mean, it's the tropics. There are diseases there.
yeah, I just feel like every time I've heard about somebody visiting Africa who's like didn't have like an immune system of like growing up there, essentially, every time I've heard so many stories of people getting like weird, crazy parasites and illnesses and dying.
Yeah.
Like when they tried to do a Survivor in Africa, like a bunch of the contestants got sick.
Right.
Like I want to visit Africa, but I'm also cautious, and that's not to say I'm just cautious about Africa. I feel the same way in some ways about parts of India, obviously about Russia. Like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of places I want to visit that I still feel like there's this little bit of cautious hesitance.
Absolutely, and your mother
And
and I
also,
were-
it's silly for me to say that though, because Africa is such a big place with so many different countries and so many different ways of thinking and living that it's like, what do you mean you want to visit Africa? Like West Africa, South Africa,
Right,
like, you know what I mean?
it's
Morocco,
right.
like, come on.
yeah, there's hundreds of languages. It's a lot of different types of places, different cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly agree with you about Africa. I mean, I've always wanted to go there mainly because, I mean, I have obviously a connection to it because my mother was born in Africa
Yeah.
and grew up there. And I always wanted to go back to the places where she lived. She was born in Angola, in Lobito, and then her family moved to the Belgian Congo and lived in near Elizabethville for, several years. And then World War II broke out, and they were put into an internment camp for 8 years in Africa, in the Congo, and they weren't released until 1947, which because Germany was so bombed out, it couldn't take any refugees.
Yeah.
So, and they were Germans, and so they.
That's what's causing it. I was telling you, there's picks in the audio. It's Wesley walking under the table, knocking the cords
banging
around.
the table, yeah, exactly.
I apologize if those little jumps in the audio are hurting anyone's ears if they're listening with like headphones or something. Anyway, but continue. Sorry.
No, anyway, so I always wanted to go back to the places my mother had been when she was a kid, because she always had wonderful memories of Africa. She really loved her childhood there.
Yeah.
And had amazing stories.
Well, she spent a lot of time in like the Belgian Congo, didn't she?
Yeah. Well, like I said, she was born in Angola, and she spent like her first few years there, and then they moved to the Belgian Congo. But she loved the Congo. I mean, apparently the Elizabethville where they lived was a beautiful place, and there was like a movie theater there. And I remember one of her stories is that when she was a kid, her parents took her to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at this movie theater in the Congo, and it was so real to her that she actually ran away from home.
Yeah. She
was like 7 or 8 years old. And she ran away from home and ran into the jungle hoping to find the seven dwarves, and of course, she wound up being found by some farmer that knew her parents, and they took her home.
Well, it's terrible because I feel like if I was going to visit Africa, I probably wouldn't visit the Congo. I know there is a place where you can fly in like the central Congo, but like there's just been so much that has happened there.
Yeah, it's a very different place now. There's a lot of poverty. It's and it's obviously got a lot of issues.
It's interesting. It's a shame almost actually, because like I feel like if you go to Africa, like it's such a big place, you'd be tempted to like visit multiple countries while you're there. But the process of like going in between all the countries and like having all the paperwork and everything you need for every like border.
Right.
Like, I mean, we've seen Ewan McGregor did that travel special where he like drove him and his buddy like did motorcycles down Africa.
Yep.
And the amount of stuff they had to go through to get through every country.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, it's a shame because I don't know if I'd want to fly. I mean, I'm sure each country has like more than enough for a single trip. But I feel like if you were interested in visiting multiple African countries, it seems a shame to like, it's like, oh, I'm going to fly to Uganda. But then it's like, if I want to travel to like some of the surrounding countries, I have to go through all this like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's so unfortunate.
Well, that's one of the, I in a previous podcast, I was talking about Paul Theroux's books. He's a travel writer.
Yeah.
And he's written a couple of books about traveling through Africa. And his experiences going, like, especially up the west coast of Africa, which is kind of the way my mother went and her family went when she was a kid.
Yeah.
He goes through like some incredible ordeals.
Yeah.
As he's traveling. But I mean, he's mentally prepared for that.
Well, it's kind of like the Sheltering Sky.
Yeah, right. Sheltering Sky is a good example, and of course, Paul Bowles, who wrote that, lived in Morocco his whole life.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of those experiences to draw from.
I guess I just think it's a shame Africa's so fractured, largely by like colonialism and stuff like that. And people stealing Africa's resources from its people.
Right, and it still happens.
All the time.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. We have service workers and people like pretending that they're doing good over there all the time, like just constantly raping the country.
Yeah.
And like, and I hate to use a word that extreme, but that's how it is.
Yeah.
And like, it would be interesting to write like a story or a book from like an alternate universe where Africa had never been like subject to colonialism, and like it had actually had the chance to like develop and had become like maybe like the most powerful nation in the world.
Yeah.
And as a result, like it was like a completely different world where like Africa was like basically what America has been for the last like 100 years.
Yeah.
Well, almost 200 years, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I feel like, and honestly still has the chance to be if we could just
like you're describing Black Panther.
Well, kind of, yeah. But like that is what Africa could have been.
Sure.
If it had been untouched by like foreign powers. I feel like Africa would have had the chance to unite and to become like a major world power.
Right.
Which is not to say they're not to some extent a world power, but like they've been largely broken up and like they've been divided and been stolen from, and like, you know, given this, and this idea has been instilled in a lot of different people in African countries that like Africans are somehow like unable to like handle their own junk. You know what I mean?
Right.
I read that a lot in what was his name? Is it Paul Theroux?
Paul Theroux.
Yeah, and Paul Theroux had a book where he traveled through Africa. What was that called? It was like the regardless, Dark Star Safari.
Dark Star Safari. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, and I remember his experience when he was traveling through Africa in a lot of countries is he would talk to like diplomats, he would talk to like government officials in those countries, and the government officials would say stuff like, you know, like, oh, you know, this country could be great if only its citizens weren't so lazy and stuff like that. And it's like, no, it's like that thought has been put in there by bullshit colonialism. And so these people have this idea that like the problem with Africa is the Africans, and it's not.
Right.
It's just oppression. The problem is oppression.
Right.
And if every foreign power stepped away from Africa right now and kind of just let them do their own thing for like a couple hundred years, I feel like we could make a lot of progress.
Yeah.
Well, they could make a lot of progress.
Yeah. Well, and
I mean, that being said, they've already had so many of their resources stolen. It might be harder now than it would have been before.
Right. Although I still think those countries are pretty resource rich, and I think they just need to have the chance to, you know, develop their own, you know, resources. And,
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of corruption, and you know, that's part of the aftermath of colonialism.
Yeah. But either way, you know. This has suddenly become like
I know. I'm afraid we're getting too boring, and
we have like the militant anti-colonialism podcast. It's weird. I don't know where to draw a line though, because it's like historically, obviously, colonialism is a lot of the reason a lot of societies have gained power historically.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is like, what has colonialism stolen and what has it given?
Yeah.
You know, and where would we be as a society if maybe we had taken a step back from conquering?
Well, I mean, isn't that Monty Python joke in Life of Brian? You know, yeah, but what has Rome ever given us? You know?
Yeah, it's like public hygiene.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Roads.
I know. No, I know, but it's like you could also argue that those societies that were given something by a larger society would have had the chance to develop themselves in time.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's like it's a complicated balance.
Yeah.
I just wish we could work more effectively as a group.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's so hilarious that schools promote group work so much, and we try to pretend like, oh, society is built on group work. It's like, not historically. Historically, society has been built on rampant individualism.
Yeah, well, and exploitation.
And exploitation.
Yeah.
And genocide. And like, we try to keep pretending, and it's like you put these kids together in groups, and then everybody at some point later on in life has a story about how horrible it was working with a group as a kid. And it's like, yeah, because human beings by nature do not work well together. That's just how it is, which is why our world is so messed up.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe if we just realized the fact that maybe group work isn't for us, we could somehow create a system that would work better if we just acknowledged what our natures were.
Yeah, yeah. Although I think that it's a very difficult problem because, you know, nobody really, I think, fully has an answer. You know what I mean? Like,
No, I know. We're all just
the
pretending.
answer?
Yeah.
I mean, like, we have a civilized society because, you know, in a lot of ways the workers are exploited, you know,
Yeah.
and for the sake of a few wealthy individuals, you know, is there some way for this to work better? I mean, you could say, yeah, we could have it more shared, but in the past that has its other problems.
The only way for this society to work effectively is for us to eliminate individualism. And the question is life worth living if you don't have individualism? Which goes back to those science fiction movies we were talking about earlier, like Gattaca or Equilibrium. If you create a homogenous society, is life worth living? And my answer to that is homogenous society is a bad idea. But if we can somehow combine all of our minds into one mind and basically be effectively one creature that has one agenda, That's the solution. We just don't have the technology yet for that to take place.
Right, but we also don't really know what that would mean either. Like,
Exactly.
I mean,
But that's what I'm saying. There is no answer.
Yeah.
The answer is wait and see, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, because maybe the universe, maybe existence, maybe coincidence has an answer.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess that's why we all watch movies and stuff, is we're just trying to ignore the fact that nobody knows anything, and the only way anyone gets anything done is by pretending they know stuff.
Yeah, well, but it's funny because I think you hit on something there, because the reason that I watch movies and grew up reading books is because I think when you're doing that, you're connecting with other minds. The people who created that, you can see their thoughts.
You're bringing it all together.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying it's going into your brain and you're joining with the people who created the stuff. You know what I mean? Like when somebody writes a book, that's them on the page. That's their thoughts.
So you're talking about collective consciousness,
yeah,
zeitgeist.
when you read it, you're kind of melding with the mind of the person or people who created it.
Yes, and in that way, I do think collective consciousness can be like a good thing for society. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think it goes far enough.
Well, it may not, yeah.
Because we've had times where, enough people thinking the same way has created positive change.
Yeah.
But equally, we've had times where enough people thinking the same way has created negative change.
Sure, absolutely.
It's funny. It actually reminds me of somebody posted about a sci-fi book from like the 50s called The Chrysalids, which I was reading about, which is about like this futuristic society after like the apocalypse has happened that lives in Canada, and like they're like a weird pseudo-Christian society that like is like super anti anything that's not like perfect human, because they believe that because in this time there's like a bunch of people who are born with like weird mutations, and they're like super racist to the mutants. You know what I mean?
Right.
So essentially, it's a society that's trying to eliminate anything that's different from what they believe is like pure.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of kids in this society that have like weird telepathic powers, which are also considered evil against the society.
Okay.
So it just made me think of that, because I'm thinking about societal change and like people thinking together,
Right.
That's like apparently a super famous classic sci-fi novel, The Chrysalids.
Do you know who the author was?
I don't remember. I'd have to look it up again.
It doesn't ring a bell.
But it was probably somebody like
Isaac Asimov.
or somebody. Here, I'll look it up right now.
Okay.
Live. Looking it up on Google live. I'm doing it. Guys, see? I have a phone. Just like all of you. The Chrysalids. Oh, there it is. It is from... Oh, it's actually not as old as I... Oh, no, it is. It is. It's 1955.
Okay.
John Wyndham?
Oh, John Wyndham. He wrote Day of the Triffids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just made me think of that.
Yeah.
The things about human evolution and people being able to communicate telepathically,
Right.
I don't know why everybody in the 50s thought at some point we were going to like evolve to be able to read each other's minds or something.
Right.
Why did they think that was the future of human evolution?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like we were all going to it's like, now I can, like we were all going to have the Force at some point.
Well, but I think that they were thinking the way you are, that there's going to need to be some sort of melding. In order for us to accomplish anything, we're going to have to be able to meld our minds.
We need to join our minds, yeah. I still think that's theoretically possible through certain kinds of technology.
Oh, sure.
I think if every person can experience what it's like to be every other person ever, we could create a level of consciousness that is, before now been unseen.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a...
Sorry, philosophical conjecture.
Yeah. No, but I obviously that would be a situation that is the result of it. It's very mysterious because there's a lot of...
It is mysterious and important.
And important. That's right. Yes, the severance reference. But I'm
this
thinking...
podcast is just going to devolve into nothing but barks.
Yeah, I know. That's all it
it's like
is.
forever. Every episode from now on, barks.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to solve the bark problem at some point.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Anyway, I was just going to say that, this business of communal thinking... it seems to be the subject of a whole lot of science fiction stories, and half of them it's a good thing, and half of them it's the worst.
It's like a disaster. Yeah,
it's like the body snatchers. You either have the Vulcans, you know,
Or the body
or the
snatchers,
body
yeah.
snatchers, you know,
What about the
or the Borg.
what about the psychic super mutants in Planet of the Apes?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
I forget. Are they evil?
I think that they're. I think that they think they're good, but I think maybe they're evil. I. It's funny because I always thought about those mutants in Planet of the Apes as being very, very reminiscent of the mutants, the mutant vampire people in
Omega Man.
Omega Man.
Yeah.
And I picture
Last Man on Earth.
Yeah. So
what is the original story called? I Am Legend.
I Am Legend, right? But I'm specifically thinking about Omega Man because I think Omega Man was made around the same time as the sequel, the second Planet of the Apes movie where the mutants exist under the underground mutants are, and they both have Charlton Heston in them, both of those movies. And I was picturing Charlton Heston driving the mutants between productions on this mutant bus.
Yeah.
You know, using all the same mutants for the two movies.
Yeah. That's a funny idea.
Yeah.
It's always funny how props and stuff gets reused in Hollywood,
Yeah.
especially in the early days.
I've been noticing that a lot lately, by the way. I've been watching movies and realizing that there's stuff in the movie that is very reminiscent of another movie,
Yeah.
and then I'll look it up and I'll realize the two movies were being shot simultaneously.
I think one of the earliest times we discussed that was that we were talking about like people reusing digital assets, and we were watching the Mist. And we noticed that one of the monsters in the Mist looks suspiciously like one of the monsters from like the arena fight in one of the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
You remember the fight where like Anakin and Padme are in that big arena in the desert, and that big like praying mantis monster comes out.
Yeah.
And we were like saying like that monster, that the shape vaguely of that monster in the Mist kind of looks like that one, and we were like, did they reuse the same digital monster that they designed for Star Wars because it was like cheaper to buy that than to like make a new one?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm just like,
I mean, it's like the aliens in that Tom Cruise War of the Worlds look a lot like the aliens in some other science fiction movie.
I'm gonna be honest, I have no memory of what those aliens look like.
Yeah, I don't really remember.
I remember
now
the aliens
either.
in the original War of the Worlds with like the traffic light eyes.
Yeah, no. These
You remember
ones-
that shot of the one alien like
yeah. Yeah, I love that scene. Yeah, but yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of recycling that goes on, you know. And I remember even when
I'm here for it.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I remember when I was watching Blade Runner the first time, I recognized some of the effects from Alien. You know, and of course they're both directed by Ridley Scott, so it makes sense that he would recycle effects.
Oh, absolutely. Well, plus, I mean, I don't want to like shit on Blade Runner because I really love Blade Runner. Like, it's a big part of my nostalgia.
Sure.
But there are some things about Blade Runner that do feel kind of phoned in. You know what I mean? Like the movie was in some ways made kind of like cheaply. Still love it, but Alien is definitely a much more like novel concept, a much more like fresh feeling thing. But that's not. I mean, I don't love Blade Runner because it's like fresh and I love Blade Runner because it. I don't know. It speaks to my interests. I mean, it's like a mixture of like kind of philosophical sci-fi and also like hard-boiled stuff, and it kind of works for me in that way.
Yeah.
But I love Alien because it's like so original. I mean, it was when it came out
When
at
it
the
came
time.
out, yeah.
Alien and Aliens, although there's a lot of people who have a lot of negative things to say about Aliens because they feel like Alien, like the creators of Alien and the director of Alien, of course, put so much effort into like making the movie this kind of like really complex metaphorical like masterpiece that was like it, and a lot of people I've heard talk about it as being like almost like a feminist masterpiece, and then they feel like James Cameron kind of threw all that out with Aliens and just sort of like tried to make it like cool.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that. I still enjoy both movies.
I agree, and when I saw Aliens, I could definitely detect the simplification of the entire concept.
The Alien verse.
Yeah, but I didn't mind because I thought that what he had turned it into was just a really fun cartoon.
Yeah.
You know, and
But
that's
it's
okay.
definitely super different.
Yeah.
Because the first movie is like very tight and very, what it's trying to get across is very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Aliens is much more like, hey, look at all this crazy stuff happening here.
Right.
And then, but luckily, Alien 3 took everything that Aliens did wrong and knitted it perfectly back together into a masterpiece
That's right.
of philosophical metaphorical cinema. And then Alien Resurrection, piece de resistance.
That's right. And Alien versus Predator.
Yeah, I mean,
Mwah.
it just gets better and better.
Yeah.
Although I will say there were some things I really liked about Alien Romulus.
Yeah, there was things I liked about it. In fact, I was just recently thinking I should watch it again.
It's weird, though, because I feel like we had all these original properties that came out, right? And then we had a bunch of the original people that made those properties try to make prequels and sequels to them that were like trash. And, well, not trash, but like not usually very good.
Right.
I don't want to completely, because there's good things about like Alien Resurrection and stuff. But like, and then now we have, because of the Star Wars sequels that were like, you know, when Disney bought Star Wars, we have a bunch of people who are nostalgic for the original properties, trying to create new properties that reflect the original visions in really like generic derivative ways.
Right.
And it's like, it's the layers of this have been so funky.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, obviously everybody loves the originals. But even in the case of like the originals, that wasn't always like, we were kind of bridging on that back then too. Because if you think about like George Lucas made the first Star Wars, was amazing. Made the second Star Wars, was a continuation of that story and was amazing. Then made the third Star Wars and it was almost kind of like, let's revisit the first one again. So even then it was kind of like,
Yeah, exactly. Let's bring up the Death Star again. In fact, I think that's kind of having weird reverberations now because, you know, I just rewatched Rogue One. And I think there's a lot of good things in Rogue One, but the importance it places on the development of the Death Star really only works if you kind of forget about the whole second Death Star,
Yeah.
you know, from Return of the Jedi. I mean, because if the Death Star just gets cheapened by being, you know, constantly remade, and then of course in The Force Awakens there's another version of the Death Star, that big planet, you know, and I just think that
Star Killer Base.
Yeah, Star Killer Base. I just, you know, it's unfortunate that we don't get to see completely different things in this universe.
I know, but I still cannot. I mean, like, I know a lot of people have a lot to say about the Star Wars sequel trilogy, but I still cannot forgive it for that. Here's another Death Star thing.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's just like the moment I saw that, I was like, you have got to be kidding me.
Right.
Like, really? What are there, 2 brain cells in Hollywood?
Yeah.
It's like the only thing you could imagine doing is doing another Death Star.
Right. Yeah, and
It's almost like they looked at Lucas making the third movie and they were like, you know what people really want to see?
right.
They don't want to see new and original ideas. They've proven that. What they want to see is another Death Star.
Right. Well, and I actually, I mean, as much as I admire George Lucas, I blame him, you know, for that, because I know that he was dissatisfied with Star Wars and the effects he was able to achieve for Star Wars, and this was Return of the Jedi. That was his opportunity to kind of redo some of those effects in a way that he had always wanted to do them. But to me, it doesn't really add anything. It's just, you know, it's not necessary. I mean, especially since, again, there's a lot of things in that universe that we would, you know, almost anything we'd rather see.
I still think it's just such a shame, because you'd think there's an enormous amount of like fandom and love for Star Wars, for comic books, for like all of these universes of things, right? And yet there seems to be so little love to spare by the people who have the money to make any of these things. And it's like, it seems to me there must be like a ton of people out there who, like, you know, maybe not a ton, but there's at least a handful of people out there who are super fans and who might also be like secretly brilliant directors or like brilliant actors or like brilliant writers who they could go out and find to do really amazing things that the fans really want to see from those series.
Right.
And they're doing nothing with them.
Well,
And it's like, you know, occasionally you'll get something really good that pops out of nowhere, like like The Mandalorian, but I get the impression that The Mandalorian was just a stroke of luck, like the first like season or two of that show. And it was, and I think the reason that was good is because it was being made by somebody who cared about the property.
Sure, absolutely. And you just mentioned when you were talking about Alien and Aliens. Okay, Aliens was made by James Cameron. Now, clearly, he must love Alien.
Yeah.
Even though it's not directed by him.
Exactly.
Alien's directed by Ridley Scott. But James Cameron was the right guy to make a sequel because he clearly really wanted to do something.
Yeah, or at least to respect the property enough to make the sequel good to watch.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not like an exact reflection of the original movie's concepts, at least it's not a boring piece of garbage.
Right.
That's like super convoluted in ways that are unforgivable. Like it's at least the characters are compelling. The situations are interesting. Mm-hmm. Like it's a fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
So like I don't know. I just want to. I guess ultimately that's what it comes down to. I want to see people making stuff that they want to, that they really genuinely are excited about, and that they want to see, and that they're excited to show other people.
Right.
And that's what that's what Thor Ragnarok felt like.
Yeah.
It felt like for the first, like somebody, whoever had been making the Thor franchise before that was like, didn't really care about Thor, didn't really care about the movie franchise being interesting at all.
Right.
Just kind of was like, Thor's a guy who has lightning powers. Like, but then when Taika Waititi gets his hands on Thor, he's like, I want to make a movie that's fun, that makes fans who like the comic books feel like they're watching a comic book. That makes them feel connected to the characters and makes it it brings you alive to watch it.
Yeah, you can feel the joy of the people making the movie, the or whoever wrote it or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Which obviously he went a little too far with in Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah, but there
like,
was still some good stuff in there.
Also, it was just the intentions were good.
Yeah.
He was still trying to make it fun
and original. Yeah.
And original, yeah. Speaking of which, that new like Red Hulk, Falcon, Captain America movie just came out. I have not seen it. I've heard so many terrifying things about it.
Really? Yeah.
I don't know who to believe, because there's people that said they absolutely hated it. There's a lot of like people who are racist who like are like, it's not my Captain America. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, because people have completely forgotten what the hell Captain America was about.
Right.
Which was embodying the ideals of an America that was like the ideal America, an America where like, real freedom reigned,
right.
and instead they've like superimposed this idea of like this super conservative, weird, psychotic 50s America.
Yeah.
And they're like, if it's not a white Captain America, like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Captain America literally could be anyone.
Yeah.
That's the point of Captain America.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know. I hope it's a good movie. I heard that Harrison Ford was a real pain to work with.
Really? Well, I believe it. He seems like he might be not the most...
He just seems like kind of a curmudgeon, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
It's like he's just getting old and bitter.
Yeah.
What do you mean I'm going to be the Red Hulk? Right. Get that camera out of my face. Right. I hate this entire cast. Right. Are you telling me we don't have white cheddar mac and cheese on the craft table? Get out of here. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's good for the character, but like, it's just, I don't know. I should see the movie. We could talk about it on the next podcast.
Yeah, we'll see it and think about it.
I don't even remember what that movie's called.
I don't either.
The Falcon and Red Hulk.
Yeah.
And Captain America.
Captain America,
It's called Harrison Ford is Tired and Wants to Stop.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so sad, because I feel like there's so many good things they could be using Harrison Ford now, and they just keep trying to like pop him into like, comic book movies and like pop culture stuff, because he was Indiana Jones and he was like,
Harrison,
Star Wars.
Yeah, Han Solo.
He was Star Wars. Yeah, he was Han Solo. Yeah.
I always thought somebody should do a sequel to American Graffiti. I mean, they did do a sequel, but they should do one now, and Harrison Ford could play the same character he played in American Graffiti. No,
don't keep dragging up old stuff. Just give Harrison Ford some new roles, or even have him retire. I don't know, whatever he wants to do. I don't care.
Well, here's what they have to do. They have to find a couple of other guys his age, and they can make like a very, fun comedy about these three old curmudgeonly guys who used to be famous, and now they're like,
So it'd be like him, Chevy Chase,
Right.
and just who are the most bitter guys in Hollywood?
Exactly.
I want to, you know what I want to see? I want to see a comedy where Harrison Ford and Dave Chappelle are the main characters.
That'd be good.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
I want them. They're neighbors, and initially they hate each other, and they have to come to a compromise in order to like solve a murder, and they slowly become best friends.
This is sounding like that show with Steve Martin, Only Murders in the Building or something.
Sure, why not? I don't know. I just anything new at this point. I feel like I'm grasping at crumbs. It's just like
Yeah, me
I'll
too.
take anything. You know, I want Harrison Ford to be in a movie with Jaden Smith. You know, how about that? Can we do that? That was another thing that people were talking about. Jaden Smith went to the Grammys. Did I mention this in the last podcast?
I don't think so.
He not the Grammys. I don't know, some awards show he went to. And he had like an outfit. He had like a tuxedo on, but he also had like a big helmet on, like a big hat that looked like a big black mansion.
Okay.
Like a big, like kind of like almost witchy style, like gothic mansion.
Okay.
And it was like solid black. And people were like, you know, making fun of him a lot for it. They were like, oh, what a weird kid and stuff. And then it came out apparently that like the reason he did that is because his sister's house burned down in the LA wildfires.
Huh.
And he was wearing it as like a statement about that.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, okay.
Yeah, why not?
Like, you know, that seems like perfectly valid.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're like an eccentric, if you're like Will Smith's kid, what, you know, and you have like a stage to stand on to be visible, like, why not?
Yeah.
You know, any kind of artistic expression is fine by me.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
You know, also, ultimately, I don't care. I don't know why people get so, like, burnt up about, like, you know, oh my God, Jaden Smith is wearing a weird hat. It's like, who cares?
Yeah, no, it's
Like,
nuts.
if you grew up with Will Smith as your dad, you'd probably be wearing weird hats too.
Right.
Well, that's a life I cannot imagine.
No, exactly. And if you can, like, you know, take that to do something that you feel is useful to the world, then you probably ought to.
Especially after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock.
Yeah.
Imagine being Will Smith's kid after Will Smith smacked Chris Rock.
Right.
Like, that's... I mean, I don't know what does Jaden Smith do when he goes home at night?
Yeah, well,
Does he like milk? Does he eat Oreo cookies?
I somehow imagine that he has a group of friends that he hangs with, and you know they prowl.
Yeah, he's got the Smith posse.
Yeah, they prowl the Hollywood Hills,
stealing stuff out of people's unlocked cars.
I hope not.
Like the bling ring.
Yeah, you never know.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't
No,
know.
I'm sure that Jaden Smith is a relatively normal guy, as far as normal as you can be, having grown up with Will Smith
In
as
that
your
world,
dad.
yes.
Anyway, all right, we're getting definitely over time now. We should probably put an end to this.
All right, put an end to the dog bark.
But it has been a delight
It's been wonderful.
in this 8th episode of our podcast, and we will pick it up from there next time.
We'll resume anon.
So everybody have a great night, and kisses from your pals,
That's right.
Max and his dad, Walt.
And Leo and
Don't
and
call
Wesley.
him Uncle Walt. Good night, everybody.
Good night.